likes, but you gotta be rough and rugged to take it.
Yeah, yeah.
Not different. I said I never was an easy critter.
She was a woman of the West. So much so that when a Paramount newsman arrived during a Fort Berthold roundup, complete with a movie camera to make a picture story with an Old West flavor, he insisted Letty ride in several sequences. He asked if she would mount and dismount her horse, Jip, if she'd be willing to cut out cattle and do other random roundup jobs for his camera. She felt many others were more qualified and certainly more dressy in their ornamental Western clothing. Letty always wore working clothes, corduroys, 3-inch boots, which are not usually worn by women riders, Stetson, and a wool-plaid shirt. Her long hair most often braided and pinned up. After watching for some time, the cameraman said, "This woman rides the range and lives the life. She shows it in everything she does. She's real." He was right. Letty was not a woman of pomp and circumstance. She was authentic through and through. Letty's father, James M. Mac Ullman, went west in 1891 from Chelsea, Nova Scotia to the new state of North Dakota and into the unorganized area across the Missouri River from Williston. This area was rugged and raw. He helped establish homes, set up a government, and brought law and order to the country. Mac was the manager of the Morning Star Cattle Company and largely responsible for its success.
Boy, that old log house had a lot of happy memories. I can look back into those days. I was young, I suppose, and maybe foolish or something, but I sure enjoyed that old place. Fortunately, I had been with him a lot, and learned as much as I could from experience as my father. So that was a blessing for me also,
Mm-hmm.
In early childhood, she divided her time between attending school in Wisconsin and living on the ranch properties of her family. Education was important to her parents, and western North Dakota didn't have a school. By August 1905, when Letty was 15, the first school in Mackenzie County was established in the homestead shack of Frank Gagnon, adjacent to the town site of Schaefer. Letty's sister, Cecilia, newly graduated from the normal school in Wisconsin, was the first teacher. They came on foot or horseback. On some cold winter days, her dad would send a covered wagon, and Letty as teamster. She and her brother Eugene would pick up neighbors. They all sat around a dining room table and shared a few textbooks. I think there were about 8 children besides. I think it took 9 children to start a school at that time. But then there were other children that lived right in Schaefer. The coming of the homesteaders meant the end of free grazing on government land for large ranching interests like Letty's father. He set out for Europe to purchase draft horses for selling and breeding. He saw the need for smaller herds of better quality.
And then my father being killed in that awful wreck, I felt I could do more good out here.
Letty married a lumberman from Wisconsin, Thomas Kellogg, in 1915. For a short time, ranching life only came in the summer. While in Wisconsin, she had 2 children, Millie Jean and Thomas. For a few years, she became a busy townie wife and mother. But Wisconsin was never home. She didn't like the weather, and she didn't like the lifestyle. So, in 1933, she packed up the children and returned permanently. Divorce was rare in those days. She was now a single parent with the enormous job of owning and operating a ranch in some of the most brutal country during the height of the Depression. How did she have the wherewithal to do it? Some would say it was her destiny. A brother, Eldridge, had been killed in a hunting accident. Her other brother, Eugene, after residing at the ranch for some years, became a chiropractor. He practiced in Williston. After the death of her mother, Millie Dean, in 1928, she needed to head home to the Missouri slopes. It was the legacy of her father that gave her courage and strength. Letty's best stories from the early days were proving to herself and the other cowboys that she could do it. She had to work harder and smarter because she was a woman.
I must be tough because I used to ride on the roundups on the reservation, and boy, I took it right with the rest of them. You know, they used to say, one foreman in particular, he'd always say, "Come on, Letty, you're a damn good cowboy. You take this outfit and go," you know. They'd give me, boy, that was the real days. When a piece of land had come up, that was real, reasonable, and within our territory, well, I'd buy it.
Three men from St. Louis who were going down the Missouri River by boat, July 22, 1952, from Williston on their way to Sanish, were surprised with a visit from Letty and her grandson, Arnold Leroy Siner. The men camped along the riverbank between two buttes to cook themselves a meal when they heard horses. When they realized they may be taken as cattle rustlers, which was exactly why Letty and her grandson investigated, they put together plates of food for a peace offering. Jack Trotter and his companions, Captain Charles W. Thomas and Colonel J.B. Page, learned Letty owned a nearby 10,000-acre ranch. Their picture, taken with two military officers, appeared in the August 9, 1952 issue of the Waterways Journal.
In as much as this war was on, and all I could get was either really young boys or elderly men. But that didn't discourage me. Although there were many men came down there trying to get me to sell out.
By 1958, the Garrison Dam had inundated Letty's meadows, which once had 10-ton stacks of hay dotting the landscape. The timber for the old log bunkhouse, the corrals, the old blacksmith shop, and the barns are now many feet underwater. She was forced to sell 2,100 acres of lowland to Uncle Sam. It changed everything. The ranch house was on high ground, and the range, which spread south from the river, was intact. However, the nostalgic atmosphere of the ranch has passed beyond the horizon, all in the name of ingenious progress.
We lost all our good land, almost 2,200 acres. They took all our beautiful meadows. That's what really, I had to buy this other ranch down here and expand what we did have. Yeah, we lost, it was 2,100 acres plus. They took it. And they pay you practically nothing for it. Yeah. Honest to goodness. I got as much crop and sold cattle that one fall for the same amount that they paid me for all that beautiful land.
As the years moved forward, ranching never got easier. Falling beef prices and winters took enormous amounts of cattle. She fought nearly all her life for membership in the North Dakota Stockmen's Association and the 50-Year in the Saddle Club, finally gaining acceptance near the end of her life. She faced the loneliness and hardship of life head-on, no excuses. She dedicated herself to the land and her animals. She embodied the strength, determination, and ability to get the job done, regardless of praise. Women are nearly invisible in the history of the West, but the truth is women were there. They've always been there. It's just that their stories haven't been researched and written. Letty's amazing story is now on paper, and we must not overlook her contribution to the ranching history of western North Dakota. We need to honor women of the range, especially those like Letty, who did it alone.
Made me angry to think they tried to take advantage of a woman because they knew they, or thought they could.
Letty Almond Kellogg died September 12, 1978. She loved to ride in parades. Letty's son Thomas still lives on the ranch. This blame horse, he was one of my own horses, but he was young. And he was just sort of green broke. And the boys had roped the horses for us. And my pal, Emma Christensen, she was Mrs. Perry later on. Why, we got a late start.
And I knew better than to do it, to start out fast. But, gee, the boys there was about 45 riders, and they were getting ahead of us, you know. So I said to Emma, well, let's go. And boy, boy, this Toonie horse, I said he was named after a fighter, and that's what he was. And I went down through the creek, and when he went up this, we had to go up through a lane, and he started to buck. And boy, I had bucking rolls on this saddle, otherwise I'd have been thrown. I had my knees right up under those bucking rolls. But boy, I was pounded black and blue. I couldn't hardly walk the next day, but I wouldn't give up.
Yeah.
I just kept right on riding. I said that's the best way to get limbered up. But anyway, I stayed with this darn horse, and some of the riders from way off saw me, and they said, boy, Letty, you sure put up a good ride. And I said, well, you didn't see me.